Mr. Zoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Jason Zali, OPR counsel to this committee. House Bill 1174 concerns jail-based voting. I trust that the committee is familiar with registering to vote and filling out a ballot in Washington, so I'll jump right into the bill. The first aspect of House Bill 1174 concerns jail voting plans. Under the bill, each county auditor must create a jail voting plan for each jail with the assistance of the Secretary of State and a jail employee who's designated the jail voting coordinator. The jail voting plan must include details about how the jail will help people who are incarcerated to register to vote, access their ballot-related information like the voter's pamphlet, access a ballot and vote in secret, and basically everything related to the voting process. The plan also must provide information to people in the jail about voting eligibility and voting rights restoration. The jails must then provide people who are incarcerated with this information and with the materials in accordance with their jail plans. The ballots must be accessible at least 18 days before the election, and jails must permit election officials to enter the jail at least 30 days before each primary and general election for voter registration, outreach, and education. And finally, under the bill, jails must document all voting-related requests and complaints and collect data related to registration and ballot return among the people who are incarcerated. And just to note, this applies to county, city, and tribal jails and would not apply to federal facilities. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Ranking member.
Is there a fiscal note attached to this as to the Secretary of State, auditors, and the local jails?
It's been requested. It hasn't been received yet.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Now, just a comment to clarify for me that this is not authorizing any new people that are authorized to vote. It's just making sure the assistance of those that are eligible have the ability to. Is that correct?
Right. It doesn't affect voting eligibility in any way.
In any way, just for those. All right. Perfect. All right. With that, we'd like to invite the prime sponsor up, Representative Simmons, and present your bill to us, please.
Working? Yeah, oh, there we go. Okay. So for the record, my name is Representative Tarra Simmons. I represent the 23rd Legislative District. It's an honor to be in front of you today with my bill. As many of you know, it is a blessing and a curse that I'm the first formerly incarcerated legislator in our nation, and that I have the opportunity to come before you and always raise up people that have often been forgotten, people in our jails and prisons. Now I'm a lawyer, and I work every day to make sure that people have access to their rights in my day job. And this is a right. People that are currently in jail do have a right to vote, but the unfortunate part is that they don't have access to their ballots oftentimes. Jails are transient housing facilities where, sometimes they're registered, but their ballot goes to their house, but they're in jail for, somewhere between 1 week and 12 months. That's where people go under 12 months. But so this bill is really about making sure that people have access to a right that they have. House Bill 1078, which was my freshman bill 2 years ago, already expanded the right to people in jail to vote. So we're not talking about creating new rights today. People, unless you are housed 24 hours a day inside of a prison, have a right to vote. So all the people in jail and in our mental health institutions have that right. And last year, Representative Gregerson was so kind to champion a budget proviso through the legislature that created a grant program for counties to work with their local jails and partner with community-based organizations to make sure that they could go in and people could have this right. Unfortunately, only 4 counties took advantage of that grant program, but upwards of around 10 counties actually made sure people had access to the right without the money, just because they were already doing it. What I know in my day job is that the organization that I have the honor of shepherding partnered with the Pierce County, who was the Pierce County Auditor, Julie Anderson, who's actually here today but didn't sign in an hour before, so couldn't provide testimony. But what we found is that around 132 people registered to vote. Pierce County was the only county that actually made sure people had access at the primary and the general. There was a 55% turnout turnout, where there was only a 61% turnout outside of the jail, so that was great. And what I can tell you from the individuals who went in to help with these events is that they are formerly incarcerated too, and it was like sending credible messengers in to not only register people to vote, but also to tell them there's a new way of life, and that when they get out, there is opportunity to go back to school, to get a job, to have a successful reentry. And so it was a very productive and helpful grant program that had unintended consequences of people connecting with a support group when they came home. So I would really like to see this continue. I have been working with many stakeholders on this. The Secretary of Support should be here today to testify in support of this, the Secretary of State. Also, many auditors are in support. WASPIC is here. They are signed in other. They do have a few concerns, but I'm willing to work with them, and I ask for your support.
Thank you, Rep. Simmons. I imagine there might be a question or two from the committee.
I'll just ask a question. I was going to ask the Secretary of State, and they may be able to respond when they testify. Do those who are in jail not have the ability to change their address temporarily, or is there a way in which that can happen that would be available to them through the court process?
Yeah, people in jail have a very difficult time with communication. They don't have access to the internet, for example. And so it would determine how long the sentence is. I think you're a criminal defense lawyer, or you're a lawyer. It depends. People are in jail for such different amounts of time. So if you're only there for a week or 2 or 3 weeks right before the election, trying to figure out how to change your address and get your ballot sent to the jail is very difficult. Perhaps if you knew you were staying there for 12 months, which is the maximum time that people usually spend in jail, you would have that opportunity to change your address. But it's very difficult, so they really are reliant on outside people to help them. Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. If that's, we have another question. Rep. Gregerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you tell me a little bit about which counties did, or maybe you did and I missed that? And
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was 4 counties that took advantage of the grant program, and that was Kitsap, Pierce, Snohomish, and Thurston. There were other counties that did it anyway. So for example, in Spokane, the auditor wanted to take advantage of the grant program, but the county commissioners refused to let her apply. I think it was an ideological difference, and she made sure anyway that people in jail had access. And I think she's going to send some written comments to you. We've been in communication with her. But the counties that did take advantage of the grant program, I'll tell you from my day job, Civil Survival, where I founded an organization, they've partnered with Pierce and Kitsap, and it was really great that they used people that had lived experience of reentry to go and register the people to vote, because then they built connections to and told them about other resources to help them be successful.
Thank you. Representative Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know in Snohomish County, we had maybe 20 or 30 ballots come in during the election. Do we have a number statewide, how many are coming in through the jail system?
No, we don't. And in fact, that is one thing I talked to the Secretary of State about yesterday, is making sure that we add an amendment on here for some data collection.
Great, thank you.
All right, so our questions are done. Thank you very much for presenting your bill to us. We will go to the public testimony side.
Thank you, Chair Ramos.
All right. So a quick reminder on public testimony, Vice Chair Stearns will be calling up folks in order, and we've got, and he'll be giving some advance notice to the folks that are coming up next so people can prepare, whether remote or live here with us. We have a lot of people testifying today on both these hearings we have, so we're going to have a 2-minute limit on testifying, so prepare for that. There's either a timer here on the table that you'll see, or if you're remote, there'll be a timer in the corner of your screen, hopefully. So please keep yourself to 2 minutes. I'd hate to have to interrupt you if you're continuing on, but I will. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Vice Chair to call up testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee would first like to ask Mr. David Elliott and Mr. Connor Lintz from the Secretary of State's office, and they will be followed by a remote panel consisting of Julie Barrett, and Janine Brashears from the Conservative Ladies of Washington, as well as Laurie Lane. So they'll be up next after this panel.
Sorry about that. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is David Elliott. I'm the Policy Director for Secretary of State Hobbs, here in support of House Bill 1174, and I'm joined today by Connor Lintz, who's our legislative assistant. Okay, cool. People in jail are eligible to vote in Washington State under our laws and state constitution, and that isn't being changed by the bill. I think you've addressed that. We support the goals of the bill in providing structure to the process, in helping the county election offices and county jails to work together, and city jails, to work together to ensure access to voting. We've met with the prime sponsor and suggested that having the assistance of the Evans School at the University of Washington evaluate best practices and finding ways to make this process efficient would be a useful thing. We are working, Connor and I are working together on suggested language for the committee in support of that suggestion, and also to make a couple of small tweaks about collection of data. The bill talks about, creating the data, but then the link is missing about bringing it back to our office so we can begin to provide a statewide picture of it. In an answer to Representative Abarno's question, yes, it's possible for somebody in jail to make those changes, but there's a practical issue of it takes forever for the mail to go through and things like that, because it's not quite as efficient as it is for you and me to just drop something in a mailbox. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
And let's hear from your mate, and then we'll take some questions here for both.
That was the testimony. I think we covered it.
That was it? Yep. Okay, you covered it. Okay, questions from the committee?
I guess just to be quick, but wouldn't it be more efficient and maybe even more cost effective just to fix that aspect of the system, to the mail system through the jails, to expedite things like the pamphlets and the ballots, rather than the potential, which we don't have fiscal note, the coordination through Secretary of State's auditors, jails, counties, cities, et cetera?
Well, not to be argumentative, I think that's one of the outcomes that we're anticipating from the bill is that. I did some survey work with with our former Pierce County auditor and other state or county auditors to kind of figure out how things were going. This was 2-3 years ago. And things are actually going decently, but what we discovered was that there's no consistency at all. And, the 14th Amendment talks about equal access and equal treatment under the law. And we don't want a situation where if you're in an underfunded county east of the mountains, I don't mean to pick on any part of the state, but perhaps you get less just due to pure resource issue than service than you might in, say, King or Pierce counties. So that's really what we're doing, is taking that deep dive to look at the situation and how we can improve it. Thank you.
Well, I have a question. One of the things I think I've heard that happens also in jails is folks get moved around without notice. So you may be in one jail, if you change your address there, and then before things happen, you get moved to a different jail because due to staffing needs, population density, they move folks around. So things to catch up to you in a timely manner also are difficult. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, I worked for the courts for a while, so but
yeah,
it's not part of my Secretary of State knowledge, but yes.
Okay, and there's no way of knowing that because that's...
And we have a county with no jail at all. Douglas County sends their folks to neighboring county jails, which is I think probably a big money saver for them. But which one do you go to? You'd have to ask Douglas, but it's probably based on how long your sentence is or whatever. I mean, if you're just there for a night, you probably go to Chelan because it's across the river. Yeah.
Well,
bet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next panel will consist of Ms. Julie Barrett, Ms. Janine Brashears, and Ms. Lori Lane, and they will be followed by an in-person panel of Mr. Taylor Gardner from Waspic. So, Ms. Barrett.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Julie Barrett. I'm the founder of Conservative Ladies of Washington, representing thousands of ladies and men across the state today. I'm here today in opposition of House Bill 1174. In 2021, the legislature passed House Bill 1078, restoring a voter eligibility for all persons convicted of a felony offense who are not in total confinement under the jurisdiction of the Department of Corrections. House Bill 1174 seems to take this one step further by requiring DOC staff and state voting officials and county auditors to create and execute a process to encourage and make it easier for this population to vote, perhaps even helping them fill out their ballot. This bill is a possible constitutional violation of the Equal Protections Clause because it would use taxpayer money for election assistance in a disparate manner. Who will have access to providing the education to these voters? That must be clearly defined and give equal access to each political party. The Secretary of State is a partisan election official at the SOS office. This section could allow for taxpayer money to be used for partisan or biased education of incarcerated individuals. See Section 4, subsection 2. Then in Section 4, subsection 5, mandating that jail employees gather personal information on incarcerated voters, including whether or not they cast a ballot, is a breach of the privacy of those voters. Jail employees appear to be given the authority to act like election officials, but it is not clear that the public will ever be able to have oversight of the process of jails giving incarcerated individuals information on voting to ensure that it is done in a non-biased and it's not done in a biased or discriminatory way. It is not the responsibility of taxpayers to foot the bill for the administrative costs of inmates making a change of address for their ballot. This bill would provide a service to inmates that is not available to other citizens who have a change of address and have difficulty navigating the system. I would ask that this committee vote no on moving this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Ms. Brashears.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on House Bill 1174, improving access and removing barriers to jail-based voting. My name is Janine Brashears. My family and I oppose this bill. With the current level of election issues Washington State already has, adding another complex and no doubt costly program is not the right answer for Washington residents. The bill states jails must permit election officials from the county auditor's office and the OSOS to enter the jail at least 30 days in advance of each primary and general election for voter registration, outreach, and education. In the few states that do have such programs, most of the work is done by volunteers. According to those volunteers, very few of those eligible actually participate in the process. The bill requires that jails document all voting-related requests and complaints, and they, along with the county auditor, must collect data related to voter registration and ballot return from people who are incarcerated. In my experience working in jails and prisons for 2 decades, I can speak to the resource expenditure in response to inmate complaints alone. This will put an administrative burden on an already stressed system. Next, jails must provide information about and materials necessary for registering to vote to all people who are released from their custody. So as inmates are departing the facility, administration is responsible for giving them information about voting in an election. I imagine the taxpayers will be paying for leaflets and flyers about inmate voting rights to individuals who are walking out the door and stuffing them right in the garbage can. Lastly, as Representative Simmons stated, an individual can be in jail from anywhere from a week to a year. And quoting from an article in the Sentencing Project from May 2020, in practice, the limited efforts to reach voters in jail have encountered logistical complications. Consequently, implementing a voter registration and absentee ballot collection system is a challenge in spaces where many residents are detained for relatively short periods of time. For example, most individuals incarcerated in a jail in the early months of a calendar year will not still be there by the time of a fall election, as they will have either posted bail, been acquitted of their charges, served their jail term, or been transferred to prison following a felony conviction. I ask you to please vote no on House Bill 1174. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
The committee would next call up Ms. Lori Lane.
Hi, do you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Hi, my name's Laurie Lane, and I'm from Buckley, Washington. I have real problems with this bill because it improves access to people who are in jail. I would feel much more comfortable if they would apply to vote once they have served their time. There's a reason they're in jail to serve and I think we really need to be careful about giving voting rights away as though it was candy. That's my concern about this. And if these people have felonies, they should have to apply once they get out of jail and have served their time. They should have to reapply for those voting rights. There's something that's very, very important and a sacred right. And I think it's being taken way too lightly. And I really think this is not very well thought out. And the fact that this is being allowed shows that. That's why I'm also against Bill 1174. Thank you very much for your time.
And thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee would next like to call up Mr. Taylor Gardner, the Deputy Director from the WASPIC. Sorry, Ms. Taylor Gardner.
A common mistake. Good morning, Chair Ramos, Ranking Member Abarno, and members of the committee. My name is Taylor Gardner, and I am the Deputy Policy Director for the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, here to testify as other with regard to House Bill 1174. So I want to make abundantly clear the WASPIC supports the concept of this bill. We recognize that the mere fact someone is incarcerated does not strip them of their constitutional right to vote. And just as our law enforcement officers are committed, so too are our correction officers across the state of Washington, committed to protecting all persons' right, and the right to vote is no exception there. After speaking with our staff more familiar with jail operations in the state, however, WASPIC identified a handful of concerns related to specifically jail operations and general safety considerations. We believe the intent of this bill to protect voting rights and make materials and resources more accessible can be maintained while also still making adjustments to the bill language that resolve some of our concerns. We appreciate that the bill's sponsor, Representative Simmons, and her gracious receipt of our feedback. We've been having productive conversations and hope that some of the amendatory language we've provided to her already can be incorporated moving forward. Just for quick examples, the concerns we have really are logistically centered. We're concerned about, whether or not the auditor and the jails are working together. We're wanting to ensure that clearance processes are still implemented and things of that nature. So I'm more than happy to take any questions about specific or share what we've offered with Rep. Simmons, but otherwise, thank you for your time and I'll answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and I assume you'll be talking to Rep. Simmons with some of those technical issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will next hear from a number of people who are testifying remotely. So first, we will hear from Mr. Richard Dahl, followed by Mr. Ronald Higginbotham, followed by Ms. Cynthia Stang. And after they are done, we will then call up Mr. Phil Bach, Mr. Michael Palm, and Ms. Catherine Humphrey. So we will start with Mr. Dahl.
Mr. Vice Chair, we are not seeing any of those 6 individuals online.
Thank you. We have one additional remote person, Mr. Timothy Barrett.
He is not online either.
Thank you. With that being the case, we will now hear from a panel of two, Ms. Julie Wise, the Director of King County Elections, and Ms. Carol Sullivan from the League of Women Voters. And they will be followed by an in-person panel of Mr. Anthony Blankenship and Mr. Julie Saucier. So Ms. Wise, or Director Wise.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Happy Friday. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. For the record, my name is Julie Wise, and I am the elected director of King County Elections. I'm here in strong support of House Bill 1174. While we know that voting by mail works well for most Washingtonians, there are some for whom voting by mail is simply not easily accessible. Voters currently incarcerated are at the top of the list, and we know they face some of the most significant barriers to voting. Last year, we partnered with the King County Department of Adult and Juvenile Detention to field a survey in detention facilities to better understand the extent to which individuals in custody know their voting rights and how they can access their ballot. While more than 90% believed they were likely eligible to vote, and they were correct, 77% did not think that they'd receive any information on how to actually vote. 64% were interested in receiving a voter's pamphlet, and 47% identified lack of information and civic education as a barrier to voting. For rights to be real, it's imperative that people know how to exercise them, regardless of their immediate circumstances. In part, enabled by the grant dollars dedicated to voting in jail last legislative session, my team was able to significantly scale up our outreach in King County detention facilities. In the general election, we held 2 in-person events at the detention facility in downtown Seattle, where eligible voters were able to get registered and get a ballot right then and there. Without exception, the individuals we served were incredibly grateful for the opportunity to cast their ballot. Voting is a key connection to community, and voting is a habit that we want to encourage for all Washingtonians, no matter where they are. I know that we at King County Elections and the Department of Adult and Juvenile Detention are very committed to building on this work going forward. Not every county has the resources or capacity that King County does. Additionally, access to the support within detention facilities varies widely from county to county. Our democracy works best when everyone can make their voice heard. This work is important, transformative work. I strongly encourage you to support House Bill 1174. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Any questions? No. Oh, okay, next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next up, we have Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you, Chairman Ramos and committee members. I'm Carol Sullivan, the Elections Issue Chair for League of Women Voters of Washington. The League believes that voting should be accessible to all who qualify without regard to race, gender, income, or their circumstance. Because democracy depends on participation of all citizens, even those awaiting trial in our county jails. But historically, there have been barriers to voting for those in jails. These are people who are going to be affected by decisions made by elected officials, and they are most often or sometimes denied a voice simply by circumstance. House Bill 1174 would create the necessary connection between the county auditor's office and each county jail. It provides a comprehensive plan to ensure that only those eligible are registered, receive ballots, and vote. And it makes sure that relevant information about voting, like dates for registering and returning the ballots, is available, along with nonpartisan voter pamphlets. A recent state law made it so that those formerly in prison and now living in the community are allowed to participate in democracy again as a voting citizen. That same right to participate in democracy needs to be ensured for those individuals in our county jails. The League urges you to pass House Bill 1174 out of committee. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to testify virtually.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee will next hear an in-person panel consisting of Mr. Anthony Blankenship and Mr. Julian Saucier, and they will be followed by our final panel, which will be remote, consisting of Mr. Jude Ahmed, Ms. Cindy Black, and Hikola Lane. So they will be after this current panel. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Ramos and members of the committee. My name is Anthony Blankenship, and I'm formerly incarcerated community organizer for Civil Survival Project and co-leader of the Washington Voting Rights Restoration Coalition. I'm here to testify. A little closer, thank you. I am here to testify in support of House Bill 1174. At any given time, there are thousands of people incarcerated in county and city jails, with stays averaging between 2 weeks and over a month, and some people awaiting trial for years. Historically, access to ballots and voter education has been neglected in jails and used as a weapon to disenfranchise Black and brown people. I have been working with community organizations, with jails, with auditors, on trying to create access to voting for people behind bars. And one thing that I think has been really important is that people who have shared that they were able to vote feel more connected to their community. They feel like they're making a difference and they're changing their lives around. As someone who's been formerly incarcerated, when you get out and you just feel disconnected, when you don't have access to work, when you don't have access to housing, being able to create change and being able to take ownership over the things that you've done, part of that is also being a good citizen. And part of being a good citizen and being part of our democracy is voting and being able to come here and testify in front of you all, right? So with that, I just want to say that this bill is an important step in unlocking the vote for people, and I urge your support on House Bill 1174.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Hello, my name is Julian Saucier. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. I was blessed with the opportunity to work with Civil Survival and Washington voters to go into a jail and register people to vote. And it was Kitsap County, and it was surprisingly successful in my opinion, because I think I myself was a person that was incarcerated who was concerned about politics, paid attention very closely, but I did not realize how broad it was. And the Amy, who worked in elections, that joined us, and 2 officers that took us around were amazingly helpful, and we all underestimated the amount of support we'd get. We ended up going to our first tier, which our pod, or whatever you want to call it, where space where people were, and we ran out of ballots in the first one. I ran out of registrations in the first one, so we had to go regroup. So 2 of the tiers gave us you know, we're not here for the applause, but they gave us applause, and we're very grateful. And you can just see in people's eyes just to feel part of something, you know, to be connected. I think that it's underrated, like how important just every aspect of being a citizen is when you're trying to return. And I think this is in line with like the Department of Corrections goals as far as of getting people ready to go back to community. I think it's in line with, I don't know how, you know, I realize all the jails are different, but overall it's a great success with the people we were working with. You know, you do run across officers that are counter or expressive in a way, and I know that one of the guys that came with us was somebody who had been in that incarcerated in Kitsap County, and it was a little harder for them to go in there. And I just say that we were all had to be approved to be able to go in, obviously prior to going in. So I just wanted to make sure that's known.
Yes, Representative Christian.
Thank you,
have a question?
thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question. First of all, I want to thank you for your efforts in going in there and into the jail system. But for myself, can you explain to us what the process was? You said that it took a process. You had to be cleared. They had 2 jail guards with you. Can you give us an idea of what the impact it was and your process to get into the jail and kind of a time, because my concern would be, while I'm very supportive of jail, voting, I'm not as, I'm kind of curious how much of a burden it could be on the jail staff. So if you can explain to us through the process, I'd really appreciate it.
The first one you like.
Thank you for that question. So the process it takes is fairly simple. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold. It was weeks ago, but it's still lingering. So you do a background check, a simple background check, which you submit to the sheriff's office and jails. From there, if you're approved, then you get the opportunity to go in. And this is not just for people that have been incarcerated, but for even government officials who are going in. So the auditor's office had to also do background checks. And then working with the jail system. After that, I think that by having staff go in, and every process can look a little bit different. Some people are not going in, or some people who've been incarcerated prior are not going into some of these places. But sorry, my voice is failing me, but it's a fairly simple process, I would say. But as you said, there is staff time that is associated with making sure that people are able to go in, or able to be safe while in there. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming in person and testifying. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
And there's some water right there if you need it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our final panel will be a remote panel and will consist of Mr. Jude Ahmed, Ms. Cindy Black, and Ms. Hikola Lane.
Thank you, Chair Ramos and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify pro on House Bill 1174. My name is Jude Ahmed, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle and the Tacoma Urban League. We strongly support this legislation as organizations that have been at the forefront of the civil rights movement since our establishment. Now, I want to highlight that those in jail have a right to vote, but not equal access to the ability to vote, and that's unacceptable to our civil rights record in Washington State. Our current state of voting, meaning the barriers to voting in jail, is effectively voter suppression targeting Black and brown voters. Black and brown individuals are disproportionately represented in the jail population, and information is not available on how to vote, nor are they freely able to learn about candidates. They don't have free access to the internet, printers, or tape to utilize online ballot printing, which all other Washingtonians have access to. Thus, incarceration is a tool designed to disenfranchise. As you've heard, people inside are willing and enthusiastic to vote, and in the recent survey distributed by King County Jails, other barriers to voting included not knowing how to register, not knowing how to fill out a ballot, and not knowing how to receive a ballot. The survey also showed that there's a need for information session and classes, as well as assistance and help. And as Representative Simmons highlighted, getting people with lived experience who connect with those in jail is imperative to building trust in our elections and providing the information they need to feel informed and empowered to vote. Voting is a healing activity. Being informed, connected, and feeling valued by our political system is a crucial part of the ability of our community members impacted by the jail system to participate in society and assist in their re-entry into our community. Our community gains absolutely nothing from excluding them from their basic rights and dignity as citizens for our county, of our country. While I commend those who are able to take the first steps to provide in-person assistance and outreach, it was frankly far from adequate. And I believe this bill is an opportunity to ensure that we are informing and valuing all of our voters year-round, not just when it suits the needs of elected officials. I urge you to pass this bill out of committee. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony.
Ms. Black.
Good morning, Chair Ramos and members of the committee. My name is Cindy Black. I'm the Executive Director of Fixed Democracy First, which is a statewide nonpartisan pro-democracy organization. I am also an active member of the Washington Voting Rights Restoration Coalition. We support House Bill 1174 to improve access and remove barriers to jail-based voting. We believe a healthy democracy encourages participation from all voters, including those currently incarcerated and in jail. Unfortunately, staff in jails and some county official election administrators have not consistently provided the education and ballot access needed for this population. The ability to vote returns a voice to impacted people and sets them up for success, a successful return to their neighborhoods. House Bill 1174 asks counties to give the people the basic supports they need to exercise their freedom to vote, such as the simple access to a ballot, the voter's pamphlet, and voter registration forms. This bill would also require visible voter information in general population areas and allow election officials access to jails at least 30 days before elections for outreach and education, which would encourage participation. Enabling people in jail access to voting isn't just a constitutional right. It empowers people to be better citizens and let their voices be heard. Please support and move House Bill 1174 forward out of committee. Thank you for your time.
And thank you for your testimony.
Our final panelist on this bill is Ms. Lane.
Good morning, House Chair Ramos and members of the committee. My name is Jacola Lane, and I am testifying today in support of House Bill 1174. I'm a voting rights advocate at Campaign Legal Center, also known as CLC, where my advocacy primarily focuses on ballot access issues in jails and restoration of voting rights after felony convictions. CLC is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization working to protect and strengthen the U.S. democratic process across all levels of government through litigation, policy analysis, and public education. I work with voting rights attorneys, policymakers, and state and local advocates every day, supporting their efforts to combat jail-based disenfranchisement across the country. Washington is not alone in working to ensure that eligible incarcerated voters can exercise their right to vote, including by improving election infrastructure and accessibility to voting for incarcerated voters. In recent years, Washington, D.C. implemented a universal enfranchisement measure, and Maryland became the second state in the country to create dedicated election infrastructure specifically for incarcerated voters. And organizations are working to create jail voting infrastructure across the country, including in Arizona, California, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, Wisconsin, and Virginia. Jails in Los Angeles County, Washington, D.C., and Cook County, Illinois are already currently facilitating in-person voting in their jails. We are pleased that Washington is joining the growing number of states working to ensure that all eligible voters can access the ballot, but voting from jails remains incredibly difficult for over 12,000 eligible incarcerated citizens in Washington and 750,000 people jailed across the country. Jail-based disenfranchisement is not the result of one bad law. Instead, it is actually caused by complicated, convoluted net of practical barriers that deprive eligible incarcerated voters. We ask that you all approve HB 1174. Every election, Washington incarcerates thousands of eligible voters, depriving them of their liberty and making voting difficult or impossible. The time has come for the state to give the eligible voters the infrastructure needed to exercise their fundamental right to vote. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony. That's all on our list, correct, Vice Chair? Just checking back with staff if any of those folks that weren't in happened to get back in through technical difficulties that we could go back to.
I do not believe so, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you for that double checking.